On today's episode, we're talking about the defensive tool set. What should you be carrying and why? Sal, where should we kick this thing off?
Well, I'll start by saying that if you peruse YouTube, any of the gun channels, everybody does an EDC video, right? And they show all the cool guy gear that they carry. I'd say the one thing that we're going to do that's different is we're going to explain why we should carry these particular things that we recommend. So I'll start off with that. There's no reason in carrying a tool if it's not necessary to carry, and a lot of people quite frankly, Denny, I think a lot of these guys lie that say they're carrying all of that. I highly doubt that they do. It's like you'd need a backpack just to carry all the stuff that they claim they carry in their
I
pockets.
have I have kind of thought that myself every once in a while. I've even been guilty of making those EDC videos and packing a couple extra things down in my
Right,
pockets just
right.
for kind of fun, knowing that the viewers probably realize I'm doing that. But yeah, I think it happens.
Yeah, but let's tell people why we recommend the things as a minimum that we recommend to carry.
Yeah, the first thing I think about is obviously my concealed carry handgun. It's the first thing that comes to mind as a gun guy, as a firearms guy, as someone who's made my living in the firearms industry for so long, as a competitor, as a law enforcement officer, as an instructor and teacher, and it's something that I practice every day. It's I don't leave the house without my concealed carry firearm, and so that's the number one thing in my mind. I know you're probably going to agree with that.
Yeah, certainly. We can't recommend strongly enough this day and age if you have the legal right to carry your gun most places, which in most of the states in this nation you have that right. Do so. Don't leave the house without carrying your gun. We just see over and over and over again these things that happen. And the first thing that the people in our culture say is, why was there nobody there armed, ready to stop this? Right. So if you're there, let's have different history. Make history next time. That's a better story to tell where the bad guy gets wheeled out in a bag instead of a whole bunch of innocent people, right? So carry your firearm, not only for those very drastic incidents, but the more mundane crime you can run into. Yourself and your family are your top priority. So carry what you need to protect them.
Yeah, I get asked all the time, what should I carry? Should I carry what size, what model, what make, what this, what that? And one of my first answers is carry what you know how to use, what you're familiar with, and what you can conceal. And I think the concealability issue is probably a pretty important issue. Obviously, it's something you need to be familiar with, you need to train with, and carrying a gun with you every day is like having a kid. It's a huge responsibility. It's something you have to live with, and it only works if you have it on you, on your person, not in your purse, in your briefcase, in your coat pocket of a jacket you might be taking off, things like that. And it needs to be something that you have trained with, that you make a lifestyle with. I know you would agree with that.
Certainly. And I would remind people that if you like the idea of carrying a particular tool, but it's not realistic for you to carry it and you end up leaving it at home all the time, it does you no good, right? So if you like the idea of carrying a full size 1911, that's great. But if it gets left at home 90% of the time, then you're indeed better off with a little 380 pocket auto or a J-frame revolver, if that's indeed what you're going to carry, right? If you get into a fight, certainly you're going to prefer having that full size gun, but that small gun is a lot better than no gun. And realistically, most guys with only large full size duty pistols are not carrying them all the time, which honestly leads me to the recommendation that I've come to over the years. And that is telling people if you want to carry as much gun as possible when possible, then most concealed carriers really need two carry guns. Have that primary carry gun that you carry when you're dressed casually, when you're entering environments that are not restrictive at all, etc. But also have that deep concealment gun for when you have to dress formally or maybe very casually where you go to the gym and you have something on in a belly band, etc. You want that very tiny deep concealment gun. I love small revolvers for all of those roles. And then that second gun is also a great backup gun for on maybe what is a rare occasion that you feel like actually wearing two guns if you're going places, crowded events, etc., where you just want to have the extra security on person.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, and that's something that we talk about a lot. Being able to have that, that really small concealable gun, even maybe going back to a small revolver. I love a full size duty gun. Why? Because that's what I am most comfortable with, most familiar with, and had the most training with. YouTube does not like guns. This is not a gun. This is a dummy piece of plastic training pistol here, uh, and it looks it's about the size of a Glock 17, a full size Glock carry pistol. For quite a long time, I didn't like carrying it because it was just difficult to conceal until the appendix type holsters really came into play, and the design behind those holsters uh, really evolved to the point that you could actually carry very comfortably a appendix style holster comfortably and conceal it. Doesn't work in all circumstances. Doesn't work if I'm dressed up in a suit and tie. In that case, I'll go back to a 4 o'clock carry position or a different position, or go to an ankle holster with a different firearm, something like that. But when these appendix holsters came about, this particular one's by T-Rex. It's one of my favorites. You see, it's got room for an extra magazine there as well. You can actually remove that. You can move these things around. It's very uh, innovative. For instance, this really changed my mindset when carrying. Now, finally, I can carry my
Mm.
actually most of the time I carry Glock 19, which is if you're not familiar with Glocks, for our viewers, it's very similar to the size of a Glock 17. The barrel and slide just a little bit shorter. The grip's just a little bit shorter. And the factory magazines are 15 rounds instead of 17, just a little bit smaller, but I love it. Now I carry it all the time because I have a holster that I really like. I don't always carry my appendix holster. Sometimes I go to a very basic holster that I maybe can change the angle on the this one's a $20. I did a review on this. This is off Amazon Mass Tack. I'm not affiliated with these folks. These are just holsters I played with and used through the years. You can see this one's adjustable. You can see where the screws move around. I can carry this in a 4 o'clock position, or I can move. If I do that, I'm going to change the angle of the clip. I can carry it in appendix position, or so on. There's another very similar holster here. You can change, if you look inside the angle here, you can loosen up one of these screws, change the angle of the clip a little bit, and carry it in several different ways. So yes, I'm a semi-automatic pistol guy. I love my Glocks. I started training with Glocks in when I go to police academy, I think it was in 1993, and carried one on duty as a police officer and as a civilian pretty much my entire life. Carried a lot of different guns, but that's my favorite. That's my go-to. I love my little Smith and Wesson 442 revolver. No, I know you know exactly what that is. It makes a great little ankle gun, pocket gun. If I just can't, or for some reason can't
Right.
carry my full size pistol, man, we could talk about this for a long time. I think the mode of carry, and you made mention to me that location considerations, there's pros and cons as to where and how you're going to carry that gun. And I'm just running off of the mouth. I'd like you to speak to that a little bit, Sal.
Well, you point out a really important aspect of this whole thing. Like you showed some of the holsters that you currently use. So, a few points to drag out of that. A single holster can't accommodate all of our needs. Typically, I find most carriers, again, if you want to carry at all times possible, a single holster probably won't work for everything. So you have several that you use. As an example of that, I also prefer AIWB carry, the appendix position carry. This is my favorite holster now for the past couple of years. It's not so much about the holster, but I want to point out a few things. And you mentioned some of these, Denny, with looking at the holsters, how you have customization in them. So, really, to find something that's comfortable, especially to carry a larger gun, full size guns, full frame guns, you need the right holster. And a lot of times there's a lot of experimentation that has to go into that. So if you look at, for example, this holster, it actually looks quite large, right? So this is an appendix holster. This is a Filster Pro Series. Fantastic filter everything they make is excellent. They don't give me anything for free, even though I know the owner. I keep telling him, feel free to send me some stuff. And he said no, he wants me to stay unbiased. So if I keep paying for his stuff, it means that it's actually good. So what do you know? I keep buying the stuff. Anyway, this is the Filster Pro series. There's other good holster makers, but what I want to point out is especially for appendix position, which for a lot of people that's the game changer in terms of being able to carry larger guns. It was for you, it was for me as well.
Yep.
So what you need though is a holster designed specifically for appendix carry. What you will often see on holsters is two particular implements that you might say, what is that? One is a wing,
Yep.
okay? And that wing, or sometimes it's called a claw, is designed to have the belt pressure push the grip of the pistol into your stomach so it doesn't push out right.
Yeah,
And
that's this portion on this
and
holster, and
it's
I
a
can
different
show you that
design,
one
but
as well.
it does the same thing, right? It's a different wing, but it does the same thing. The other common thing that is not always necessary, I find it's often necessary, just kind of depends on the holster, but is what's called a wedge. Now, what you see there is a foam wedge. There's a variety of companies that make them that you can literally Velcro onto the back of the holster. And you may look at this and say, wow, that's like a bulbous, huge thing. How do you fit that down your pants? The truth is, the wedge does two things. First of all, it makes it more comfortable, much more comfortable against your body. But the wedge forces, again, the grip of the gun into your body. So it just depends on the way the holster is designed. I've used some in the past that I don't need wedges. The truth is, I don't really need it on this, but it just helps ever so slightly with more concealment and it makes it more comfortable. So wings and wedges, it requires experimentation. The other thing I would mention is you pointed this out, adjustability in the holster. So you want a holster where you can adjust the cant and the ride height because
Yep.
everybody's different with how high or low to the belt they want that holster.
Yep.
So there's a lot of customization in all of these new good appendix style holsters. With strong side hip, I would say your more important adjustability would be cant there, the ability to cant it slightly, but a lot of customization is required in a good appendix carry holster.
Yeah, and I'd like to speak to our viewers who may still be a little on the fence about carrying appendix because of, for whatever reason, say comfort for one thing. Yeah, that is an issue. It really is. It's not the most comfortable thing in the world, but there are some things that you can do to be more comfortable. Like the wedge that you showed can really increase the comfort. This is a really simple thing. Guys don't think about this sometimes. So when we're carrying appendix, we're wearing an untucked shirt, right? Your holster is going underneath that shirt, right? This increased my comfort level 100%. That's just wearing a t-shirt underneath the shirt that I'm concealing my holster with. Really, really helps. So simple. I do not recommend carrying, I don't want my gun against my body because I don't want the oils, the sweat, the stuff creeping in there. I'm going to get my hairy guy. I'm going to get all caught up and uncomfortable. And that's just no fun at all. So if you're on the fence, get the right equipment. Just like Sal's saying, it's excellent advice. There are a lot of things you can do to increase that comfort level. And especially when you get those holsters that you can adjust the height. So it's not sticking out. You don't want that holster sticking way out, the gun sticking way out. You want to be able to wedge it in there enough that you can sit down without and still hopefully produce children someday damaging your body, but also to being able to really conceal your gun and be comfortable. So really, really good advice. Holsters, when those new appendix holsters came out, the new designs changed my world 100%. I went from old school 4 o'clock to appendix a lot. And I really, so many good ones out there. They're really easy to find. Your filter is great. Love my T-Rex. I do want to address one other thing when choosing the right holster, regardless of whether it's a concealed carry holster or see my trigger finger discipline, Sal. It's ingrained in me, buddy.
Mm-hmm.
Retention is so important.
Yeah.
You want a holster that's going to retain your gun without having to clamp down on. It's very, very important. If you can't put your at home your unloaded gun in your holster, shake it around a little bit without it coming out, that holster does not have the appropriate retention. So, folks who are watching, make sure your equipment is safe to use. Make sure you're adhering to the four cardinal rules of gun safety. Treat all guns if they're loaded at all times. Never point at anything you don't want to shoot or destroy. Finger off the trigger until ready to fire, and always know your target and what's beyond that target. Cannot preach that enough. Preach it to your kids. It might be the one thing that saves a tragedy from happening one day. But check your equipment. Make sure it's safe, has the proper retention. Very, very important. I have $20 holsters that have great retention. I have $200 holsters that have great retention. It's just all in the design. It just depends on how they were engineered.
Absolutely. And the last thing I would mention about holsters, really do yourself the favor of taking good training that teaches you not only how to draw effectively and safely, but how to reholster safely. You know, there
Oh,
are
yeah,
some
my goodness.
instructors that specialize in appendix carry for that. You know, anyone interested, check out my blog. I'm getting several classes posted for this coming summer. The class that I'll be teaching is probably the single deepest dive into safely reholstering that's done in any class, right? It is an extensive deep dive into safely, effectively, efficiently, and quickly drawing the gun. A lot of focus on appendix carry. So, you know, it's those kind of classes. There are instructors who specifically focus on that because appendix carry, it's not that it's more dangerous. In fact, one thing I prove when I teach people is actually you can reholster more safely because you have better control of the gun while it goes into the holster, but you have to be switched on, right? It's
Yeah.
not for the careless, because if you do injure yourself, it can be a more catastrophic injury than, you know, if something is on your strong side hip, etc. But it all comes down to training. So seek out the right training for any of these carry modes you choose.
Yeah, I know. I can just my crystal ball says we're going to have some comments about, hey, why didn't you guys discuss what caliber you should be carrying? That's a whole nother discussion. I think you and I could probably have a really great piece on that down the road. Let's just plan on doing that. As a matter of fact, Sal, we'll talk about defensive calibers and just make that a whole different topic. But we have so much to cover today. I just want to kind of keep things going. And another thing you're going to see me carry if I do a pocket dump is I always have a blade on me. Not only for as a defensive tool, I'm not really a knife fighting guy, but just as a cutting tool, because you never know when you need to cut yourself out of danger. And I'd like you to speak to that a little bit as well.
Yes, certainly. So we are all a result of our own life experience to a great extent. The main reason I carry a blade, whether it's a dedicated knife or often just a multi-tool with a cutting edge on it, obviously, I got stuck in a seatbelt in a car when I was 12 years old, and nobody had a knife in the vehicle to get me out. My brother actually ran into a convenience store and borrowed a box cutter from the guy to come and cut me out.
Wow,
Literally, that was the last day of my life I ever left the house without a cutting tool on my person.
I'll bet.
So, yeah. So, you know, the primary reason for a cutting tool on your person, emergency rescue. If you have to free someone from a seatbelt, if you have to free someone's clothing from machinery, etc. That's why you must have a cutting tool on your person when you leave the house. And really, for me, it's that simple. I've gone through phases where it factors into my self-defense or not. Typically, I prefer a good and small, readily accessible fixed blade if it's going to be a fighting tool. And I always wear it on the opposite side of my gun hand. So I wear it accessible primarily to the support hand. That way I could use it for gun retention. To be honest, I went through a pretty strong phase of that and I trained with it, etc., for several years. Then I kind of phased it out. I'm just not that inclined to embrace something that is problematic in terms of the legal aftermath. Believe it or not, the way, unfortunately, our judicial system is set up, if you use a knife defensively, you can land in trouble. Whereas if you used a gun to solve the same problem, you just simply wouldn't, because it's considered felonious
Hmm.
in the American judicial system using edged weapons. Now, again, self-defense should be self-defense. And certainly, if it's the only tool you have on you, I always try to carry a knife if I can't carry a gun, right? And you're just going to have to roll with it. But generally, if you have the choice between one or the other, say you were in a situation where you're literally wearing both and you could use either to accomplish the same task, the gun is the no-brainer go-to. I remind everybody, legally, they're both lethal force. It doesn't matter which one you use. They are both lethal force under the law. You have to be justified to use lethal force to use either a blade or a firearm. Where the blade does excel, though, is there's a certain niche, and if you've done any amount of combatives training with integrating weapons with hand skills at contact distance, the small blade can be an absolute game changer. If you're tangled up with somebody who's overpowering you or somebody who's trying to disarm you of your gun. So it can be a total game changer for that. But that's kind of a niche, And again, I've gone through stages. However, whether I'm carrying it for self-defense or not, the the edged tool is always on my body. Sometimes it's just a small multi-tool with a folding blade that doesn't even lock just
Yeah.
because I need it and it's what I can legally be carrying. But I need the cutting tool as an emergency cutting preparedness device. That is the primary role of it for me.
Yeah. Cool thing about a pocket knife or a little folding blade knife. This is my favorite. It's just a birthday gift from some good friends of mine. It's a little Kershaw,
Mhm.
uh, really nice little blade. It's in our discussion notes when you and I were talking about this episode, one of the notations you made was that if you have a folding blade knife, you need to be able to open it with one hand, and I think that's a very important thing to think about because your other hand might be busy. And odds
Right.
are, if you have to use this in an emergency, a lot of things are probably going to be going on. And maybe it's not even a pocket knife. Maybe it's a multi tool with a blade. I love carrying a multi tool with me. Can it be a defensive tool? Sure, it can.
Mhm.
Even without anything deployed, it can be a defensive tool. This is a Gerber. I've had this for probably 20 years. I love these multi tools for a lot of different reasons. And this one, if it's not actually in my pocket, it's in my bag, which I'll talk about here in a little bit when we kind of get to that, because I do want to address ways of carrying your defensive tools other than in your pockets. But it's a fantastic tool as well. So I do recommend having one of these. Besides that, you've got tools. You might have to fix
Yeah,
your stuff.
certainly.
You
And
might have to.
even with multi-tools, they make some models that the blade is accessible external, so you could still open it one-handed.
Good point.
So if it is the only cutting tool you have on your body, you could consider one of those options.
Yeah, good tool as well.
Mm.
As I was digging out, I just got to show this to you. It's kind of neat. As I was digging out some cool stuff, this is a really cool knife that a friend of mine gave me years ago. We have an antler handle here and a
That's
nice
very
big
nice.
hilt. I don't
It's a
even remember
Bowie,
the name
essentially, a
of it.
Bowie knife.
This is not some. This is pretty good size. I don't know if you can tell what size it is on camera here, but the blade is probably what, a 6-inch blade. Nice big knife. This is not something I'm going to carry on me every day, but I'll carry it in the woods or if I'm hunting
Sure.
or whatever. I like that. But I don't. The EDC. This is an EDC item that I always have on me is a pocket knife for sure. We got to
Yeah,
keep moving on because
absolutely. Yeah, one last thing I'll say about knives. Know the laws in your local jurisdictions. Ironically, knife laws are sometimes a lot more ridiculous than even firearms laws. There's a lot of states where you can carry a Glock 17 and 3 spare magazines, no problem. Yet if you carry a blade over 3 inches or whatever, it can jack you up. So it's totally ridiculous. You have to be aware of those laws.
yeah, just ridiculous laws for sure. For instance, I have some OTF knives, which means out the front. The
Mhm.
blade comes straight up and out. That are not necessarily legal everywhere I go, but that's not necessarily the type of knife I'm going to carry as an EDC knife because the blades tend to not be as strongly mounted
Right.
inside of the hilt of the handle of the knife. They're more, for me, they're more of a novelty item. I have one that does have a window breaker on the end, but I can break windows with a lot of stuff. So I like it. It's kind of fun, but I only use that to open boxes with these
Not
days.
necessarily practical. A
It's
good
not my
folding knife,
EDC.
good
Yeah.
folding knife is hard to beat as an all-around tool to carry.
100%. Here's another item that's always in my pocket is a source of light. And that's something that I know that you and I agree on that should be an EDC item. This one is a Streamlight MicroStream. I don't have any affiliation with Streamlight. I'm just a fan of this because it doesn't take a lot of room. Even if I'm dressing up wearing a suit or dress pants, I can carry this in my pocket and it's diminutive, but it has enough light that I can get the job done. It's got this little rechargeable port here that's hidden. It's got two modes. I think it's about 400, 500 lumens on the bright side, which is pretty nice. What's your go-to carry light, Sal?
So for me, it's also a Streamlight. This is the it's the Pro Tac 2LX.
Yep.
So I kind of invest in family of tools, and I like this model as well as the Streamlight, the HLX, which is more powerful. It's got a bigger bezel though, so I like to carry this one. This is 500 lumens. Now, granted, you can get lights this size that are about 1,000 lumens now as well. I don't get too worked up about that. This is a good bright beam, and the bigger one is incredibly bright. It's 1,000 lumens, very bright. Why I like them is both models, and I have several of each model, but I'll show you what's inside, is Streamlight's rechargeable batteries.
Yeah.
Okay. And they are incredibly bright. They make the light brighter than if you had just two regular, 123 lithium batteries. And these you just recharge. So I keep two for each light that I have. And when one dies, I just put in a new one. I always in my EDC pack have an extra one, so I just throw it in the light when I need to. And here's another thing to think about. Since we're talking to preppers in this audience, which I love, I don't have to worry about saying things that people say, oh, you're paranoid. Well, if you're a prepper and you want to be prepared for illumination after the grid goes down, have a solar charger, one of the little ones that can recharge your cell phone, right? That can recharge these batteries, and you have literally an endless supply of being able to power that light.
Yeah. And, just to remind folks, a flashlight is not only just a means of illuminating things, it can also be a deterrent in many cases, right, Sal?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, for me personally, if we're talking about tools specifically for self-defense, the handgun is, of course, priority number one. For me personally, the second most important tool for me is a handheld light. Not a light on the gun. That's optional, nice to have, but I remind people to use a light on your gun for things you typically need a light for, like lighting up a dark place. You can't point your muzzle around at everything. You don't know what you're looking at, right? So
Good point.
handheld light is a must. Light on the gun is optional. I keep lights on my bedside house gun because I like it for that. If you just pick up one thing, you have everything you need. But for the
Yep.
carry gun, I don't bother with the light on it at all. However, handheld light, for me, it is the most important tool that I carry accessible to my support hand. And I'll
Yep.
explain a few reasons why. Now, the first thing we all get wrapped up about is shooting with the light, right? Well, certainly you can do that. You can take dedicated classes on how to do that. But for the armed civilian, it's pretty rare, if ever, that happens outside of the home. Okay. In the home, it's more important than outside of the home. But other things the tool can do. If you need to identify people at night, I don't think people appreciate what a deterrent it is taking 1,000 lumens in the face when it's pitch black.
Yeah.
So it's a deterrent. I've had incidents where people give me the creeps. I put that light on them and they immediately turn and walk the other way. I have found that people associate bright lights with cops.
Yep.
So all of a sudden they're saying, hey, maybe that's not a victim. That might be a cop. We want nothing to do with that. The other thing that it does is when it's pitch black and you put that beam in somebody's face, it completely hides everything you're doing on the other side of the light. They cannot
Yeah.
see what you're doing. So if you have to draw your gun discreetly, they cannot see it. So it actually masks all of your movement. The other thing I would mention is that personally, I prefer light that protrudes from the bottom of my hand
Okay.
because now it's a very effective impact tool.
Yeah.
And, I've taken dedicated combatives training just using these kind of tools. It's incredibly effective. If you're, let's say, tied up on the ground with somebody, you get that out of your pocket, you run it into their ribs, into their neck, into their face. They want to get away from that tool. It
Yeah.
has a devastating effect, steel on flesh.
Yeah.
So it's very good for that. And finally, it's a great glass breaker. Now you're always carrying a tool that you could smash out of a window. So there's, 6 or 8 great reasons to be carrying a good light on person.
Yeah, agree 100%. And also, I do prefer the lights that have the button on the ends, so I
Certainly.
can use. By the way, you know the old Chapman technique, right?
Hmm.
The Chapman technique, where I don't know if they're still teaching that in the police academy, but that's this technique of being able to use the light separate from your gun, and sort of let it follow your
Hmm.
gun. I have to say that my last name's Chapman. Just something
Yeah, I
kind of
mean,
interesting.
there's many, techniques that are the truth is using handheld lights over the past few years, the techniques have kind of been streamlined and slimmed down. For example, especially for a civilian concealed carrier, most likely the only thing you would have or ever have to do is use the light in a searching capacity. You see something threatening, just suck it into around your eye level and
Yeah,
deploy the gun, right?
yeah,
That's more realistic for most civilians because usually we're not going to walk around like this in a
yeah,
public area. Again, at home things may be different, but public area, right?
yeah.
Probably not.
Something interesting just happened when you did that. You sort of blinded your camera. I got you working off a laptop today,
Hmm.
and it just goes to show that how your light. You don't have to have 1,000 lumen light in the right circumstances. You can temporarily blind somebody
Hmm.
with a 300 lumen light under the right
Yeah,
circumstances.
that's true. If it's pitch black and this is 500 lumen, and it's not always just about the lumen, it's about the hotness of the light, the tint of the light, candela, all that kind of stuff. But if it's pitch black, you completely
Yeah.
occlude what's behind that light to their visibility. So it's a fantastic tool. Again, for me, it is the number one tool to be accessible to my support hand.
Yeah, I agree. And just so everybody out there knows, you don't have to spend $1,000 on a light. There are a lot of great lights. You don't even have to buy it doesn't have to be a stream light. It can be any light's better than no light, even if it's one of those $2 Walmart lights that you drop three AA batteries in. Any light is better than no light. Make sure you have light with you. I keep little throwaway lights around. I give them to my nieces and nephews and uh, lady friends that I see that I just ask them, hey, do you carry a flashlight in your purse? Why no? Why would I want to do that? And I go into my speech and I
Right.
say, I got something for you here. This might help you out down the road someday. Let's continue on, Sal. We're making really good progress with this. We talked about our firearms. We talked about our cutting tools. We talked about our handheld lights. I think it's about time to talk about some medical here. And this is an IFAK, which stands for Individual First Aid Kit. I know you've written a lot of articles and information about this sound. I'd like to hear your spin on IFAKs.
Yeah, so you just showed a true, IFAC that is great for like keeping in a vehicle. I keep a big one like that in each of my
That's
vehicles.
exactly where this
Yeah.
lives. This lives in the
Hmm.
back of my truck. It's pretty sizable. I'll hold it up kind of next to my
Right.
torso here so you can see the size of it. This is one of the more sizable ones that I have.
Yes, absolutely. And in a kit like that, you can have multiples of everything, for everybody in the family who might be in the vehicle. It's a great idea to have that. When it comes to what we can actually carry, obviously medical items tend to be pretty bulky. So just as a quick rundown, there are 4 primary tools in in terms of controlling severe bleeding. So traumatic hemorrhage control. How do we control severe bleeding? There's four primary tools. I absolutely urge everybody to get medical training, even if it's no more than a 2-hour stop the bleed course at your local fire department. Even that will show you most of what you need to know. So get some medical training in using these tools. So essentially, you have the tourniquet, you have packing gauze, you have a compression bandage, and you have chest seals. Those are the four primary, specifically bleeding control devices. In terms of importance, most people tend to agree that if you carry only one item, the tourniquet is really the go-to item to be carrying. I absolutely agree with that because I can tell you the main reason I carry medical is not even for violence. It's for accidents and injury with machines. I grew up in a farming community. I
Oh
knew
yeah.
personally people who got injured with farming equipment. It's still till now one of the most hazardous occupations in
I
the
know
world,
I know
farming.
someone whose father lost his leg
Yes.
on a combine.
And
Ser
you
For
and
real.
what you mentioned brings perfectly segues into this point. Machines tend to injure the limbs, and the
Yep.
tourniquet is what you need to stop severe bleeding from the limbs. Leg or arm, go high and tight with the tourniquet. So if you're going to carry nothing else except one item, I would say the tourniquet. If you have room for a second item, I think packing gauze, especially a hemostatic packing gauze, that's with the blood clotting solution built into the gauze, is the way to go. And the reason for that is just like the tourniquet is the immediate solution to stop severe hemorrhaging from a limb, packing gauze is the immediate solution to stop severe hemorrhaging from a junctional location, your neck, armpit, groin area, etc. You would pack a wound. Chest seals are made to seal the chest so that people don't get a collapsed lung if there's a puncture through the chest wall. The thing is, that usually takes 20 to 40 minutes to even happen for that pressure to change and build up in there. So it's not as immediate a concern. The other thing is you can just with plastic and duct tape make an occlusive dressing to put over someone's chest. The pressure bandage is also important. But again, it's not as time sensitive as, say, the tourniquet and packing gauze. So, what I would say is if you are on a camping or hunting trip where you're 2 hours from airlift, have a kit, a big one with everything in it. If you're walking through the mall, I would submit that if you carry a tourniquet and packing gauze on person, you've really got everything you're going to need to handle an immediate emergency. That's what I personally carry on person is those two items. I carry it in a little pocket pouch like this. I think this is from Wilderness Tactical. They make different pouches with different size pockets. This is a softy wide tourniquet. That's one of the two, standard tourniquets with a windlass. They fold down very small. In the other pocket, I've got hemostatic packing gauze. It literally just goes in a hip pocket. In fact, it goes in the same pocket that my light then also attaches to the hem of the pocket, and it just disappears. In fact, sometimes when things are wider, it conceals better than if you just have one thing because now it's just all wide and just disappears in the pocket. So it's a great option. If you want to carry everything, an ankle cuff is the way to go.
Oh yeah.
I've never gotten along with them. I've used them many times throughout the years, but it's gotten to the point where like, I just hate this thing.
Yeah.
So, I just keep those two primary items in a pocket and I don't lose sleep beyond that. If
Yeah.
I need more, then certainly in my backpack, I have a full IFAK. The one other thing I would mention is, it can be this simple, just in a Ziploc bag. Here is all four major items. We got a tourniquet, packing gauze, chest seals, and a pressure dressing. And in fact, I even have trauma shears in this little pack. So I like having a couple of packs like this around because they're portable. And when I want to throw it in my hunting bag or my laptop bag when I'm out and
Yeah.
about just doing business, I've got a whole trauma kit with me.
We have done a ton of content on the Survival Dispatch channel, reviewing different IFAKs. With a quick search, you'll be able to find lots of suggestions. There's a lot of great companies making individual first aid kits, big, small, etc. If you want to experiment and find a little pocket kit, like Sal's talking about, speaking to our viewers right now. You want an ankle kit. You want a larger type kit for your truck, medium sized kit, or something you can even carry on the back of your battle belt when you're out training or at the range. Check out the channel. There's a lot of great content, a lot of great reviews that we've done in the past. So I think it's time to segue to less lethal weapons, because that's something you and I've spoken to a little bit in the past. People are really asking a lot of questions about less lethal tools. What are we talking about? What are they good for? What circumstances do you use them? And what would we recommend? And I've got a lot of opinions on this, but I'll let you kick that off.
Okay, sure. So less lethal tools are going to be dependent on the environment you're in. For example, if I go on a hunting trip to the Rocky Mountains and I'm going to be in the mountains for a week, I'm not too worried about less lethal. I want lethal on me for sure, right? For four-legged critters, but not so worried about less lethal, with the exception of having bear spray actually with you in those kind of environments is a good idea. There we go. You know what else bear spray is great for? I keep a fire
Antifa?
extinguisher.
Just
Yeah,
kidding.
well, I mean, essentially, you're onto it. So here's where
Okay.
I keep a bottle of bear spray in the coat closet near the doors in my home. I keep a good sized fire extinguisher and a full size canister of bear spray in the unlikely event that you have to deal with something outside of the home. Typically, if there's violence outside of the home, don't leave the house, right? However, have you ever had, say, your young brother-in-law get into a fight with people who are at a party next door? Been there, done that. If you have to go deal with something that might turn really violent, having a big canister of bear spray is going to be a lot better to short circuit violence before it can turn really deadly, right? So
Yeah.
just something to consider. So in general, when we talk about less lethal, we're talking about walking around town in urban areas, suburbia, and I am an absolute believer in particular in OC spray.
Yeah.
And the reason for it is not, see, the problem is there's still this idea that OC spray is designed for women who don't want to carry a gun. That's
Yeah.
not what it's designed for. Now, it's better for that woman to have at least OC spray than nothing, but this has nothing to do with your gun. It is not made at all for the problem that your gun is made for. Your gun is a solution to violent, deadly threats.
Yeah.
This is not that solution. If you're
Yeah.
facing a deadly threat, that's what your firearm is for. But here's a statistic people need to be aware of. 80% of assaults in this country every year, it's always roughly about 80% of assaults are what are referred to as simple assault, not deadly assault. So, two guys get in a fight over parking space and they're pushing each other around in the parking lot, right? If one of those guys draws a gun and kills the other, that's going to be a bad day for him in court, right?
Yeah.
You can't go to guns for something that is just hands-on simple assault, and the majority of assaults are just that. So you should have some hand skills, absolutely have fighting skills, but OC spray, consider it as a substitute, or not a substitute, but an alternate longer range jab. That's what I consider it. Okay. An eye jab in particular, because what this allows you to do, if I don't want to close contact, I don't want to go to hands. Here's another thing to consider. If you carry a gun and you go to hands and you're rolling around on the pavement with some guy, how long is it going to take him to discover you're wearing a gun? And now you're in a fight over the gun and somebody's getting shot. Right. So if I don't have to make contact, I don't want to. So if I can force his eyes closed while I move offline, so he might be still aggressive, but now he can't see and he's flailing around, I'll take that any day than going to hands with him.
Yeah, I see. That's a really handy size of pepper spray OC that you've got there. How many
This is palm.
ounces is that?
So it's
Couple
only
ounces?
half ounce, but it's
Half ounce?
incredible. It's incredible how many bursts you can get. So typically, most training with OC will teach a half-second burst, right?
Yeah.
This will do easily 20 half-second bursts, and it's got a really good range. It's got about a 12-foot range.
Cool. Yeah.
It's a stream, so it has very little blowback. In fact, I've experimented with it in wind, little if any blowback. And this is from Palm. It's that's the name of it, POM Palm. You can buy them on
Yep.
Amazon. This is my favorite overall for form factor. I carry it on my keys, and the
Mhm.
reason for that is when I walk through a parking lot, I'm holding my keys.
Yeah.
That's all I'm holding, right? And then I've got the pepper spray right on it, but I'm just holding my keys. Being attached on your keys makes it easier also to, be in a place of employment and take your keys out. Nobody thinks a thing of
Yeah.
pepper spray being attached to keys. Nobody even looks
Yeah.
at it. Whereas if you have it clipped to your pocket, it's always more
Yeah.
conspicuous. So attached to
That's a
keys
little
is a great
larger.
way to
Yeah,
go.
this is gonna be more easily recognizable and bigger. This is not. I'm holding it next to the camera, so if I hold it next to my body, you can kind of see the size. This is actually I forget the sizes. This is 1.59 ounces. This is mace pepper gel.
Hmm.
It's larger, has more content. This is the gel. And you can speak to this, Sal. The gel tends to have a little less residual effect if you have to use it because it doesn't come out in a fog, it comes out in a stream.
Hmm.
And hey, you and I did some content recently, and you were talking about that little cap
Yep,
and using that to be a deterrent in that
exactly right.
by
Because
doing that you
criminals know what
draw,
that sound is. They know
yeah,
what
you
that is.
draw people's attention to what you have in your hands, and that could actually just be a deterrent just having that all together. I want to reiterate something that you said, folks. We're not talking about pepper spray being a good weapon to use in your house. It's not.
Hmm.
It's a weapon, a less lethal weapon to use to get away from
Correct.
something to
To
use
break
and retreat.
contact. Yep,
So
to
this
break
is something,
contact with someone.
yes, less lethal weapons, in my opinion, are weapons that are best used outside of your home in a less than lethal situation. And pepper spray, OC, whatever you want to call it, is probably the prime example of a less lethal weapon. But there are a lot of less lethal weapons. There's actually some very innovative things out there. Our CEO Chris Heaven has been training with the Berna uh, pepper guns, and this is not a firearm. YouTube gods, this is not a firearm. This is a less lethal Berna pistol, and in its magazine are pepper balls. Now, these are OC balls that disperse OC upon impact, and we've done a lot of reviews and research on these. It's just another innovative, less lethal tool that only works if you have it on you, if you trained with it, and if you have the knowledge on when to use it. What's your opinion of these, Sal?
So I'll tell you where I like something like that. First, let me say that I far prefer the orange color one. I think they make one in black too.
Yeah,
If it's less lethal, I don't want it looking like a gun, right? Because I don't
yeah,
want to get myself shot when I'm holding something that's not a lethal tool,
right.
by another concealed carry or something. So I like the orange color, but where a tool like that is great? There are really restrictive places, certain cities, etc., states that don't honor your carry permit, where you probably can't go with a firearm, but I bet that might get under the radar. You'd have to check. I'm not giving legal advice here, but you know
Yeah.
what? I'd rather have that next to me at night when I'm sleeping in a hotel room than nothing. That's for
Oh, heck
sure.
yeah. 100% for sure.
You know,
Yeah. Another couple of less lethal tools that I am intimately familiar with are tasers. I've got two examples of taser self defense devices here that both do the same thing but look very different. This looks like a gun. It is not a gun. This is the taser pulse device. This shoots the darts out of the cartridge once it's been inserted, and you pull that trigger and activate it. It shoots the darts out. I'm going to do a little close up. People are very curious about what these little probes look like. You can see there's a barb on the end, and tasers are meant, if used properly, if deployed properly, to cause neuromuscular incapacitation, basically to lock the muscles up. It will only cause full body lockup, and I use that in quotes, full body lockup, if the circumstances are just right. They're not always just right. Both darts
mhm.
have to come within 1 inch of the flesh. They don't actually have to penetrate the flesh, they just have to come close. A lot of people don't know that. So this dart doesn't actually have to penetrate. It only has to come within 1 inch of your flesh. And so um, The darts have to be a certain amount of, apart, so to engage a large muscle group. And what does is, what's happening is the taser device, the impulse is taking over for the brain and basically
Right.
telling your body to lock up the muscle group in between or in the certain area where the darts hit. I'm just using this as an example. My fingers are about a foot apart in my chest and torso. And if I were shot with a taser device in this area and under the right circumstances, my complete upper body would lock up and probably much of my lower body. We've all seen those videos. I know you've seen them, Sal, and you probably even spoke about it, maybe even written some articles about the bad guy getting shot with the taser by the police or by civilians in some cases and just locking up like a
Mhm.
statue and just falling over to the ground. And we're like, yes, there's one for the good guys there. But they only work when used under the right circumstances. This is
Right.
not something you want to defend your home with,
Right.
even though it can be very, much of a deterrent under certain circumstances. It's a device that's meant to use and retreat and get to safety and survive the situation. There are only so many pulses. Uh, with a you got about 25 to 30 minutes worth of neuromuscular incapacitation with this device with a fresh battery
Mhm.
under the right circumstances. But really, are you going to try to hold somebody
Right.
there for
Right.
25?
It's
Heck
much
no.
more a law enforcement thing.
You're using
Yeah.
it to get away
Yep.
from the you know whatever. You know what I'm talking about. This is the Taser Bolt 2, does exactly the same thing, but it looks like a flashlight. It doesn't look like a gun. You're less likely to get shot if you're carrying one of these, or if the ladies are carrying. This does not have a cartridge in it. This is unloaded, but it can still be used
Mhm.
as a stun gun. Tasers and stun guns aren't the same thing. Tasers actually shoot the darts. These both shoot the darts, but these can both be used as a stun gun
Right.
as well.
Right.
So let's say you shoot it, one dart hits the bad guy, the other dart misses. If they keep coming at you and you keep the device on by making contact with this a certain distance away from the other dart, you can still cause neuromuscular incapacitation, but only as long as you maintain that contact. So again, less lethal devices that are used to use and retreat and get away from the threat. So I'm a certified taser instructor. I've used these a lot. I've spoke about them a lot. I don't carry one every day. I do
Right.
like my options. Sometimes I usually have one in my vehicle. I don't necessarily have one on my person every day. If I were going to have a less lethal device and I had the choice between these two, the pepper spray is what you're going to find on my person.
Sure. Sure. The taser, what I like about it for the civilian is, again, if the legal environment prohibits you from carrying a firearm, but you can carry one, I absolutely think it's a great tool. Between OC spray and that, you have significant capability on person. Now, for everyday carry where you're carrying a gun, I think the OC spray does a lot more for the civilian than the taser. One thing I'll mention about the taser, it's obviously much higher level of non-lethal force because remember, when people go down, they can get severe head trauma if they hit
Oh
just
yeah.
right, etc.
Yep.
So it's a much higher level of force. So for me, for the civilian, it's a good substitute when you can't carry actual lethal force on your body. But for carrying less lethal force on your body every day when you're carrying your gun, I think OC spray is the way to go.
Yeah, you bet. And you
Mm.
can there's a lot of research on OC spray. This is made by a company called Mace, MACE, company that's been around for probably 40-ish years in the law enforcement
Mhm.
industry. They have a civilian division. This particular pepper gel is 10% OC, and it also has UV dye in it. Why? So that eventually the bad guy can be identified under UV light under the right circumstances. So, incidentally, also the these cartridges with the tasers have felonious identification devices in them as well,
Oh, no
uh,
kidding.
in the form of little micro pieces of cardboard that are fly through the air with the darts that can you can
Oh, I
trace
didn't
the
realize that.
area,
Okay.
the device, or even the bad guy, and they
Mhm.
all have the serial number of the cartridge, not the weapon, but the cartridge itself. So that if you do need to trace that back to the user, for instance, say the bad guy gets your taser and
Mhm.
uses it in a bad way, if you kept your records, you can identify that
Interesting. I didn't know
particular
that was a
device.
thing
Yeah,
with tasers. Yeah,
yeah,
that's pretty neat.
yeah.
Yeah,
Very interesting.
the one last thing I'll say about OC spray is the gel serves a definite purpose. You're far less likely to get effects of it back on you, or far less likely to get effects on other people in the environment. That's why, for example, if you're a security guard for a hospital, that's what you want to be carrying. You don't want, OC getting sucked up in the circulation system and
Yeah.
making patients sick, right? The one caveat, though, is the gel is proven to take longer to take full effect.
Yeah.
So
Right.
that is one issue to bear in mind. It's the most
Yeah.
impervious to wind. So if you live somewhere where it's windy all the time, I think the gel's the way to go.
Yeah.
But it does take a bit longer to take full effect. Whereas
Yeah.
the stream, that's what this is still pretty wind impervious, and it takes effect much more quickly. And then if you get the fogging systems that shoot out, it's like a shotgun pattern,
Yeah.
those take effect the most quickly. The problem with them is any kind of even a slight breeze, it'll blow right back on you.
Yeah.
So it's all a trade-off of what you're looking for.
Yeah, the Berna pellets from the Berna less lethal device that have are the OC pellets. I'll unload this one and show you what they look like. We've shot these on Survival Dispatch and made some content with them. And I told Chris Heaven that I'm going to let him shoot me with one of these in the chest, as long as I get to wear one of those uh, nice quality gas mask. Will you
Right.
test the gas mask at the same time? But we'll try to shoot in slow motion so you can see the particles disperse and see what you're getting. You'll be really surprised at what kind of dispersion you can get from one of these little
Oh,
burner
I bet.
balls
Yeah, they must
hitting a
have an
hard
awful
surface.
lot of stuff in there. There's
Yeah.
if these canisters have half an ounce, there's probably twice as much of that just in that ball.
Oh, it's
So,
bad stuff. Yeah, I just going back to speak to what you were talking about. The pepper spray, the OC, has a longer lasting effect, even though it might take a little longer to take effect. Whereas the tasers, being the actual tasers that shoot the darts, have instant effect when
right.
deployed properly and used properly under the right circumstances, but almost immediately the person on the other end of that taser can recover, stand up, walk around, breathe, and act normally. There are 0 deaths recorded with the civilian version of tasers. 0.
Right.
We all hear and see stories about police use of tasers, and sometimes we have tragic circumstances. Almost always, there are other underlying circumstances
Right.
behind those instances, and most of the time it's drug related. So a lot of stuff to think about out there, guys, when you're making your decisions on what sort of defensive tools you're going to carry. We just scratched the surface tonight. So Sal, I think we should just ask our viewers, let us know in the comments, what do you carry? Did you learn anything tonight? Did we help educate you? What can you tell us that we did not mention, and maybe something that you would like us to elaborate us on down the road? Sal, I'll let you kind of close us out with sort of a summary of what we talked about tonight.
So we looked at different tools for different reasons. Obviously, environment will often dictate what you can carry. If you're fortunate enough to live in a free state and you can carry all the time, carry your handgun. That is the primary defensive tool in the 21st century in the United States. All of these other things are supplemental and also important tools. And consider all of this as just tools. Isn't it Musashi, the sword guy, who famously said, the mind is the weapon, everything else is just a tool, right?
That's right.
So
Yep.
all of these things are just tools for the trained, prepared individual to use. And that is the most important thing that we come back to. Get the training in the use of these tools, get the training in the right mindset. And that is the primary thing. All of these other things are just supplemental tool set to enhance your capability.
100%. Sal, really appreciate you. Really appreciate your input tonight. Folks, if you haven't checked out Sal's book, The 21st Century Minuteman, you got to get it. It's available on Amazon. We'll have a link below. And we'll maybe try to link to some other articles that Sal's referred to tonight as well. Really appreciate you, Sal. A lot to think about, guys. Drop us a comment. Let us know what you think about tonight's video. Let us know what you carry. Did you learn anything tonight? Et cetera, et cetera. We do read the comments. If you'd like us to elaborate on something, such as what caliber should you be carrying? We've already been asked. I think, Sal, we've got
Right.
that project ahead of us real soon. Thanks for watching, everybody. Make sure you hit those buttons, like, subscribe, comment, and share. Uppercut, jab. Be careful out there. We'll see you next time.